I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, same here. So I know that you had just returned from a nice trip. Fun fact for me, anytime I would travel, whether it be for pleasure or for business, I always had one of these guys with me. So I'm going to go ahead and just for the sake of the conversation, um, get myself my fill of vitamin C, all 1,000 milligrams of them today. But I'm glad that you're back. Hopefully, it was obviously with COVID and everything going on, it was a safe travel, and everything works out for you there.
Yeah, no, it was fun. Hawaii is always a great place to visit. Highly recommend it. Great weather, great food, great people. So
Yeah, for sure. With that, I think we can jump into it. For those of you, we'll kind of run through introductions, and then we'll get into the content. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is actually Ryan Wilson, not Dr. Wilson. I'm the director of the Health and Pharma vertical here at Samsung Ads, where my team in particular is focused on helping brands across OTC, RX, wellness, fitness, you name it, to achieve their various business outcomes, whether it be script lift or doctor visits or switch to brand or indication, or in this instance, driving sales of product. To take a step back at Samsung Ads as a whole, which covers much more than just the pharma vertical. We are founded and sitting on top of hundreds of millions of Samsung devices, including smart TVs as well as Galaxy devices here in the United States, all of which are giving us real-time data and insights across 45 million households here in the US that gives our partners unique and holistic access into their most prized audiences, consumption and viewership habits that they can then utilize to target and activate against in CTV as well as digital, providing truly a end-to-end solution that at the end of the day is all measurable, and helping to bridge the gap between their linear and digital marketing efforts. With that, we're here today, obviously, with Yasmeen. Yasmeen, I'd love for you to take a couple minutes just to introduce yourself.
yeah, hi everyone. My name is Yasmeen Hussain. I'm the brand manager on Emergen-C at GSK. I've been on the brand for about a year and a half now, and I work on a lot of different things across the brand, all things digital, social, influencer. So yeah, no, it's been an exciting time to be on this brand. I started working on this brand just a few months before the pandemic hit. So I've kind of been through the pandemic. I'm sure we'll talk about this, Ryan. There's been some really interesting learnings, and then now as we come off the pandemic slowly with the vaccine rollout, it's just like a whole different set of it's like a whole different landscape. So yeah, so it's like I said, it's been a really good time on this brand.
Yeah, I mean, certainly starting a couple of months before pandemic, just from my own use, and as I said, I'll use Emergen-C, and it's part of my kind of not daily routine, maybe a little bit more now because of the pandemic. But I feel like joining a brand like that, and having that remit leading into a pandemic is one thing, and then pandemic hits, and all everyone talks about is their health, their wellness, and the need for a strong immune system and all those types of things. So let's kind of rewind a little bit to, let's say April, May of last year, and kind of how that impacted your strategy, right? I mean, it was so early in the year. You probably had just rolled out some campaigns and things of that nature. News hits, what did you do? I mean, what was your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, obviously caught all of us off guard. Can't predict something like that. I think, like prior to the pandemic, we were, going to go about messaging Emergen-C our usual way. And then when the pandemic hit, immune health was like top of mind for consumers, right? So, and demand was like through the roof, right? So one of the things that we were struggling with was not struggling with, but trying to figure out was like how best to talk to consumers in like a very engaging and emotionally relevant manner, right? So like, when immune health is top of mind, but when there's a lot of fear and anxiety amongst consumers, because it's like, I know people probably hate this word, but it was an unprecedented pandemic and unprecedented times. And so you really couldn't go about your messaging your usual way. You really had to think about making sure that you were kind of, you were being empathetic to your consumers and empathetic to the fear and anxiety that they were feeling. So I think that was a big shift in like trying to figure out like, okay, everyone's talking about immune health, everyone's talking about Emergen-C. We did our social media listening, and so it's like, how do you, continue to engage with your consumers in a conversation, but not like, just sell product to them, like can engage with them in a meaningful way. So that's where we launched the Emerge Our Best campaign. So in December, right before the pandemic, we had launched Emerge Your Best, which was more like fitness focused. And then with the start of the pandemic, we kind of shifted a little bit to Emerge Our Best. And this was more around, Emerge Your Best was more around like individualistic performance goals. Emerge Our Best was more around community. And the video was called A Love Letter to Normal Life. And it really struck an emotional chord with our consumers because it talked about all the things that consumers were feeling, all the things that we missed, simple things like meeting friends for coffee or a drink or dinner, holding hands. And so that was like the primary shift in our messaging. It was going from like talking about how about Emergen-C to really just talking about like how we'll come out of this together and really reinforcing that sense of community.
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that there had to have been sort of a balance too, right, between your creative, right? Like in no way, shape, or form are you saying like, "Hi, take Emergen-C, you'll be COVID, free," basically, right? So, I'm sure there had to be a nice balance there of, obviously you want to get, people that are thinking about it to consider Emergen-C, but at the same time, you didn't want to put the message out there that this is a catch-all and you'll be safe and things of that nature. So how did those conversations kind of internally happen, or did it just naturally and organically come about just from, as you said, your social listening and things of that nature?
Yeah, and excuse me, I'm recovering from a post-travel cold. Sorry, but
now you really need this.
I know I've been actually eating the gummies. So I think like for Emergen-C, we can't make claims around disease state. So you can't say that Emergen-C will treat a cold or a flu. Obviously, definitely couldn't talk about how Emergen-C would cure COVID, right? Couldn't even go near that, which is the right thing to do. So we had to really think about how to, how to make sure we know, because consumers were talking about that, right? Like if you listen to social, consumers were using Emergen-C as part of their wellness routine, which is fine. Like Emergen-C is a part of your wellness routine. It helps support immune health, but we couldn't, there were certain things that legal guardrails that we had to stay within. So I think it was just making sure that we had those honest conversations with our legal team to make sure we were clear on like how we were messaging to consumers. But honestly, it really wasn't about, it wasn't really that hard because the brand intent was never to talk about Emergen-C as a cure for COVID. It was really, again, the messaging was really around making sure, we wanted consumers to know that we're there for them and just making sure we're being empathetic with them and engaging in conversation besides just the product, like really just talking about like, more higher level than the product, really talking to them about how they're feeling and kind of offering reassurance.
Yeah, so in order to accomplish that, I would imagine, social, potentially even influencers, things of that nature. Was that kind of the strategy there, or did you stick to, your tried and true of linear and video to kind of that sight, sound, and motion? How did you guys go about actually bringing that to life?
Yeah, so we had it was more digital led. So we're using influencers a lot now, but at the start of the pandemic, at that time we hadn't, really kicked off or engaged with influencers at that point. So it was really around leveraging digital channels, OLV and social primarily, as well as our website to offer consumers, to engage with consumers. So the campaign that we launched, A Love Letter to Normal Life, was it was digitally driven. So it was OLV, we had social content, and then we also drove consumers to our website where we offered gift cards to help consumers. It was just a little something. It was a little way for us to give back. Because remember, at the start of the pandemic, unfortunately, a lot of consumers were losing their jobs, right? So it was really a way for us to do our part and to give back to the community. In addition to that, we also had a donation that we did to Emergen-C. Again, healthcare workers were doing so much for us, so we wanted to make sure that we did our part to give back to the community. So it wasn't just like all talk; it was like, our messaging followed by definitive action.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think thinking back on it too, just as everything kicked off and Q2 got underway last year, which is where this really kind of started to impact everything. Just across the board, a number of our partners, just they had to pause media, not for fear of repercussions and things of that nature, but just everything was flying off the shelves, especially within the OTC space, right? Like everyone was buying Advil, Tylenol. I think we still have like 7 cases in my closet. Yeah. It's just one of those things that how did that impact you guys as well, right? Because there needs to be that balance as well. If you don't have product, how do you advertise for it to sell it? It's just it doesn't go hand in hand there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was a major struggle that we had as a team, is like, how do we, our supply was constrained, and actually eventually we did, after we ran the Love Letter to Normal Life campaign, we did have to cut back on media, because to your point, like, we didn't have product on shelf, so we can't keep driving consumers there. So that, but it was, yeah, I mean, that was just an unfortunate thing that we had to kind of deal with for part of Q2 and Q3, and then we came back on once our supply was in a better situation in Q4. But that was a tough call that we had to make, but it was the right thing to do, because again, like, even though we weren't advertising product, the Love Letter to Normal Life, it's not about the product. It's still like, you're still to some degree driving to shelf, so you still need to kind of be able to balance the two. So yeah, so that was a tough call that we had to make. I'm sure a lot of brands were in the same position.
Yeah, they certainly were from our perspective, and I think as I'm sure you realized in Q4, when things started to kind of open up a little bit, you probably found that you had a couple of new competitors in the market than you probably did going into pandemic. I mean, you can't kind of turn on a TV or go on anything digitally without seeing elderberry this, elderberry that, and immune health, and all that kind of stuff. So how has kind of your overall viewpoint of your market now kind of changed as a part of all this?
Yeah, I mean, with the pandemic, there were a lot of new entrants into the market. It's interesting. Prior to the pandemic, there was a huge focus on like holistic and naturals, naturals products. So consumers really wanted to, and I think you see that trend in like a lot of different categories. They want something that's more natural. But during the pandemic, there was like a huge focus on like, the strongest immune health product available, which makes complete sense. So there, yes, I mean, so and now as we come off the pandemic, I think some consumer behavior will shift back to like pre-pandemic. It's hard to say, it's like playing out live, but there a lot of new competitors came into the category. There were a lot of like, there was one product by Nature's Bounty, which is like a high potency vitamin C. And then just some of our competitors, right? Like just launch additional, whether it was flavors, formats, etc. Private label is a lot bigger than it used to be pre-pandemic. So yeah, I mean, competitive landscape has changed, but Emergen-C still maintains its like #1 position in like immune health because we have such strong equity and heritage in it. So it's really, it's for us, it's really continuing to reinforce that with our consumers.
Yeah, it's like the the 7-minute abs and all that stuff. You just wait for the next one to come out. Well, we have 1,005 milligrams of
Yeah.
vitamin C and all that stuff. But I think as it pertains to your media, how have you kind of shifted your strategy, if at all? With new entrants, there's the obvious desire to maintain your turf, right? I mean, Emergen-C, is well known. It's been in market for a very long time at this point. I think everyone from college students all the way up to my parents, grandparents, etc., are taking it at any point. So I'm curious, kind of, did that come across? Did you guys change strategy at all to kind of defend that throne, if you will?
Yeah, I think like there's it's becoming a crowded landscape, right? So you really have to make sure you differentiate and stick out. So I think for us, I think this is something we were doing anyways, but it was something we had to dial up, right? So like in terms of media, I think we'll continue to invest in TV because that is a very efficient vehicle for us. It helps drive mass reach and awareness. But there is definitely a shift to spending more in digital, especially with influencers, with our ECRM campaign, just making sure that we meet consumers where they are. And then also provide them like value, provide them content that's interesting, that's engaging, that's exciting, right? Like versus just like advertising to them and talking about how great Emergen-C is. Like give them some, give them like a reason to look forward to like consuming your content because there's so much that they're being bombarded with. That's how you stick out, is like making sure you have creative that's really engaging for consumers.
Well, and I think along those lines, it goes back to what your campaigns have been centered on is, make this part of your just daily life, right?
Right.
Like a daily vitamin, right? Just this should be part of your daily routine, and making sure that they understand that, and that it becomes kind of one of those items when they go to the supermarket on Sundays, like I do, or anything along those lines. It's just one of those items you just pick up, right? And it's just kind of in the medicine cabinet at all times. Um, Now, with that, and obviously, pandemic has kind of accelerated this. You're seeing a tidal shift in just consumption habits across the board, right? And obviously, TV is king still and not going anywhere entirely, but the overall shift in consumption habits has leaned into the streaming aspect of things, in particular, advertising, video on demand platforms and services. So how has that kind of impacted your strategy as well? You had mentioned that you're kind of going a little bit more where the consumer is, and
Mhm.
as just outlined, they're within TVs, right? And that's where they're spending a bulk of their time. So how are you kind of balancing that and utilizing digital to kind of enhance what you're doing from a linear perspective?
Yeah, I think so we'll, like I said, we'll continue to invest in TV and CTV because you got to meet consumers where they are, and they are they're streaming a lot of content. But with the pandemic, one thing that we learned was, I think with the same thing with every brand, was like more and more people were engaging with digital content. And so for us, it was, in terms of like, I guess, strategy, it was really just, again, like making sure that the content that you have on social or on YouTube, etc. Like it's content that's engaging for consumers. It helps like it helps it helps like provide some sort of value to consumers, right? So um, in terms of like, and sorry, I just want to make sure, but like in terms of like channel shift, right? Like I think the shift from linear TV to CTV and digital will continue to happen. We don't plan on like cutting off linear TV anytime soon, but yeah, we'll continue to invest in digital platforms, and like as new platforms continue to to pop up. Like I would love to test TikTok and Twitch, like live streaming. We just really haven't done that as well with like with CPG products. I feel like we're we're probably not as far ahead as like a brand like Dove or Nike is, right? So there are platforms that we're we play in currently, and there's new platforms that like I feel like a lot of brands are on TikTok right now. That's something I would love to test, but it's not like a core platform for us right now.
Well, if there are any TikTok reps on this call right now, please reach out to Yasmeen. She certainly would like to talk. So I think you mentioned a couple of times, following the consumer. Help us understand just who your consumer is, and I would imagine that it's changed again because of COVID. But who is it that you're really trying to reach, and how are you trying to engage with them throughout the day? Just knowing that, especially now, we're kind of all over the place. The ecosystem is fragmented beyond belief. We're all kind of consuming content everywhere. So what's the core audience that you're going for, and how are you kind of dividing and conquering to ensure that you're reaching them, in the right environment at the right time?
Yeah, I think there's like, so in terms of audience, like I feel like there's like two primary audiences. One is like people who use us, who come in, during the season, cold and flu season, right? And they're going to use us like very reactively. So there's that. And then the second audience is like a much more proactive audience. They're very proactive about their health. So it's not just about emergency or immune health. They're proactive about all things, right? So I think like it's being able to message to each of them respectively. We're making, and it's also making sure your like messaging is personalized to them, right? So like throughout the pandemic, one of the things we learned was like people are much more proactive about their health. Like more people are proactive about their health. So our loyal consumers, our core set of consumers are they've been using Emergen-C for years, and they incorporate it as part of their daily wellness routine. But now like more and more people are really thinking about immune health in a way they've never thought about before, but holistically. So it's not just about like popping vitamins and taking Emergen-C. It's really about making sure you're exercising, you're sleeping well, and you're managing your stress. So I think for us, it's really about making sure that we make Emergen-C a part of their wellness routine, as a lot of our core consumers already use us. So like there's been a lot of we've been testing a lot of messaging around making Emergen-C a part of your daily wellness routine, and that's really worked out well for us. Again, like immune health is like, it's interconnected with every other aspect of your health. It's not just one thing. So you really need to make sure that and consumers understand that, right? So it's really working with them and seeing like what their personalized wellness routine is like, and how does Emergen-C fit into that personalized routine.
Yeah, and you brought up the immune health, right? And I know you guys had conducted kind of your own immune health habits kind of study.
Yep.
So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, but I think that it speaks nicely to exactly what it is that you just mentioned you're trying to do, right? Make this part of your daily routine. But what takeaways or key takeaways or findings did you have in doing that study, and how have you kind of incorporated that into your media mix?
Yeah. I mean, I think again, it's more like that. I think the key takeaway is, I would say, is that like consumers are, and this is right now, right? Hopefully this behavior stays and it doesn't go back to what it was, but they want to make sure they approach their health like in a holistic manner. So there's two things I'll say. First is like making sure you communicate how Emergen-C can be a part of their daily routine. whether it's in the morning or whether it's something they're using while they're working out, etc. But it's like something that immune health is something that you should be thinking about all the time, not just during COVID or during cold and flu season. So make it a part of your daily routine. The second thing is like looking at like exploring, we're exploring partnerships. Can't go into that in too much detail, but it's like, looking at like what other, what partnerships can we work with that would help make Emergen-C a part of like a holistic wellness routine. So like, it could be like fitness influencers is like, that's one thing. Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot, but it's just like, I think it's, again, going back to like, you can't talk about Emergen-C in silo. It has to be something, it has to be a part of like a holistic routine.
Yeah. So, a couple of things that kind of pop out there as well is, you mentioned, fitness. So like fitness buffs and, people that are health conscious and things of that nature. Are you utilizing a similar kind of approach when you're utilizing data to target, right? Because I mean, reality is, yes, at this point, you could probably, just target adults. Most people right now, it's kind of front and center, immune health, got it, need to focus on it. So you can kind of reach and engage with anyone. But how do you guys typically leverage data? Are you utilizing any purchase behavior data that you guys get access to and then activating on first party segments? Are you reliant on third party? Like, what's your data strategy, and what have you been incorporating and finding useful this year in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix of both, first and third party. We're looking at, so like one of, again, like most consumers use Emergen-C during cold and flu season, but we want them to be aware that like immune health is something that they're using year round, right? So people who are purchasing us in cold and flu season, we're retargeting them off season to help like drive daily usage, right? But in terms of like audiences, right? Like there are certain audiences that are more receptive and more likely to use Emergen-C outside of cold and flu season, right? So like you started off talking about travel, parents with kids in daycare, teachers, and then like fitness, nutrition, etc. So we are leveraging third party data to also look at like those segments and those audiences to see how we can help drive relevance with those audiences through like personalized messaging. So that is something that's like a core part of our strategy right now, is to like figure out which audiences are most receptive to our messaging off season.
And how do you go about measuring that, right? I mean, is it, with the big box retailers, obviously during pandemic, I'm sure a large majority of your budgets go towards, the Targets, Walmarts, and Amazons, et cetera, just because, frankly, shopping habits have changed, right? We can't just go to the Target down the street anymore. It's, everyone's shipping and everything else. So how do you go about measuring outside of the big box? Because, you can get the SKUs and everything else. But yeah, how are you measuring your digital to find, success across all of the different verticals that you're working across?
Yeah, I think it depends on the campaign and the tactic. Like, obviously, there's a bigger emphasis on like being able to measure conversion. So like for those audiences, like depending on what vehicle or platform you're using, the first thing would be like so I mean, so there's a few metrics you can look at, right? You can look at like your engagement metrics, like are they the content is on like social, are they sharing it, are they commenting on it, is it something that like they're really engaged with, right? But I think like there is a greater emphasis, I would say, on like sales attribution and making sure you figure out like which which tactic or which combination of tactics helps like drive conversion for the brand.
Yeah, and I think, at a time like this, and as we touched on, the fragmentation is real in terms of people
Mhm.
are linear, people are in all different streaming services, whether it's
Yep.
AVOD, SVOD, and then you throw in the fact that there's digital and people are on their mobile devices, they're on their tablets, working from home, they're on literally everything all day, every day. So, the challenge that comes from that is being able to optimize around reach and frequency and where am
Mhm.
I, where is the actual impact coming from? So, along those lines, what's kind of been your strategy there? I mean, when you talk about linear, when you talk about CTV, online video, that's very much top of the funnel awareness, getting in front of the right audience, right? And then you want to move them down the funnel, obviously, in that consumer journey. Um, so are you kind of looking at your activations in that light where, linear and CTV are kind of in the same bucket? We want that to be, upper funnel awareness, and then kind of trickle down and, help us kind of understand how do you focus on that at the various different stages of a consumer journey?
Yeah, I mean, so like so Emergen-C has like high awareness, right? So like, but like as I've been saying, like TV will continue to play a role, and then like, but there are more and more people that are like cord cutting, so they're just not consuming content on television. So, they're just consuming more digital content. So I think in terms of like how, I think it's a little bit of both, right? Like our media mix includes both like upper funnel activities like linear TV, CTV, et cetera, and then also like the digital like social influencers, OLV, et cetera. But I think like for digital, there we're in the past, like for the content on digital, I feel like it wasn't like it wasn't as relevant to that platform as it could be, right? So I'll just, to be very transparent, like for social, I think like the way we were activating on social was like not the best use of that platform. Like for social, right? Like we were some of our ads were, well, I don't want to say like television ads, but it was like more product focused. Our content wasn't as engaging. So I think we're like, there's a greater emphasis and focus on that. But I think that, yeah, I think like in terms of like the, how are we approaching media? It has to be a mix of both, like upper funnel, and like mid and lower funnel tactics. And then we don't have DTC, right? So that's the one thing that like a lot of our competitors have is like they have DTC on their website. We don't have that right now, so we rely on driving to Amazon, Walmart.com, etc. So we're making sure we incorporate smart commerce into our digital activations. So making sure, you can we're trying to make the purchase process seamless for the consumers. So like they see, they see the content, they click on it, and it's like a quick add to cart. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things too that, I'm sure you didn't think you'd have to be thinking about, but like, is that truck going to be able to be driven to deliver our
Yeah.
product to this Walmart, and get it on the shelves and things of that nature. Um, but as we're kind of looking at, what's next and what you guys are focused on, how much are you actually attributing, 2020 in your planning for the future, right? I mean, it was, hopefully blip on, knock on wood, blip on the radar, an anomaly year, and, things can, somewhat get back to normal, and we're starting to see the vaccines and, all of that kind of stuff. So are you taking it with a grain of salt? Or are you actually utilizing that data to kind of inform your strategy moving forward? Like, how are you kind of viewing it on your end?
Um, Sorry, and you're asking how are we using like the learnings that we've had from like 2020 going forward
Yeah,
into
just, I mean,
2021?
you probably saw a big uptick in sales and things of that nature that, like, I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of data and
Yeah.
information that you can take from it, but how do you guys use that moving forward in your, your strategy, your activation, your measurement, and everything in between?
Yeah, I mean, I think So like, again, for immune health, like the landscape has changed, but right now I think the one thing that's kind of like something that we're trying to figure out, and it's playing out live right now, is like, as the vaccines are being administered, right, will consumers go back to their old habits pre-pandemic, or will that stay? And I think that's the big question that we're in the midst of trying to figure out, and I think that'll help inform a lot of the future activations for this year and 2022 onwards. I do think that, I don't, I think a lot more consumers will be like proactive about immune health, but I don't think it will be to the level of during the pandemic, because it was, I think, like, at the start of the pandemic, people were buying product out of like, out of fear. And now that that fear is gone, like, thankfully people are vaccinated, like we're kind of going back to normal, the new normal. So it's a difficult question to answer, because I think it'll be leveraging learnings from 2020 and 2021, but also kind of keeping a pulse on how things are playing out live as we speak, right? So like, I mean, some of the basics, like making sure, we're offering like, we're offering engaging content with consumers, where our creative is something that resonates with them. Obviously that'll continue to stay the same. But when we look at like the kind of like the future of immune health, I think that's to be seen in the next few months, like how that plays out in this landscape.
Yeah, for sure. And I see April has rejoined the conversation. I have just one more question,
Sure.
and I think the biggest is, you've touched on, the importance of CTV and continuing to go that direction, especially with where where your consumers are now and where they're spending their time. You've made mention of TikTok and some of the social platforms that are becoming a little bit larger. Anything else that just on your mind that you have an interest in? Not saying you'll activate tomorrow, but it got your attention and you're kind of starting to sniff around a little bit to see what's there for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we're just like thinking about. I think I mentioned earlier, Twitch and just like live streaming in general. I think I would love to test that. I want to I think like anytime you can offer like an experience to consumers, it just helps you connect with them more. So I think that's something that I would love to test for Emergen-C.
And final question, I swear. What is your favorite flavor of Emergen-C?
I actually love, so most people just think that we have powders. We also have gummies. So just a quick plug in there. So my favorite are actually the elderberry gummies. They're really, really yummy. So definitely try them if you haven't yet. They should be back on shelf now.
I'll keep you posted. I'll follow up once I've had the opportunity to get that. And I'm sure my daughter would absolutely love it.
Yep. Awesome.
Well, thanks so much, Yasmeen. It's been fantastic speaking to you, and thank you to Brand